I'm gonna share with you the 5 biggest mistakes I've done in my 20s because at the time I had the financial intelligence of a squirrel. These were great life lessons for me, so I want to share them with you. Hopefully you will learn from them and maybe even avoid them. Most of the videos I found about this topic were pretty generic. If I had to resume them in few words, it would be save more money, budget better, invest your money, and that's pretty much it. But this video is different. I want it to be like a discussion with a 20-year-old me telling him what mistakes to avoid so he can have a comfortable life when he will be 30. This is exactly what you will get by watching this video, and if you stick till the end, I will share with you a simple way that will help you improve your finances not only in your 20s but also in your 30s, 40s, 50s and beyond. So without further ado, smash the like button and let's get into it. Number 1, blaming my low income for being broke. I always believed that I was broke because I didn't make enough money. I would usually receive my paycheck, spend it within 2 to 3 weeks, then borrow money from friends. When I received my paycheck, I would give back the money I borrowed, automatically having less money for that month, and this cycle would repeat month after month. I really believed that once I will make more money, I will be able to manage it better. But when I slowly started to make more money, I noticed that that cycle was still there. I still couldn't cover all my expenses and I was still borrowing money. Then when I turned 27, I started to make quite a lot of money, almost $7,000. And although I wasn't that desperate anymore, I was still relying on credit cards and mainly living paycheck to paycheck. When normally with that income, being single, no kids, no wife, I should have been able to save at least half. This is when I realized that something was seriously wrong with me, so I started to look into personal finance, and I remember reading something that if you cannot manage $1,000, you will never be able to manage $5, $6 or even $10,000. Instead of blaming my low income, I should have maybe learned how to manage that income and how to make my expenses fit in it. At the time, I had a very close friend of mine. We were at the same age and we had the same income. But somehow, this guy managed not only to fit in his budget, but he would also save month after month after month. Back then, I never understood how he managed to do that. And the worst part, if you'd look at both of us, you wouldn't say that I'm the one having the most expensive life. But now I realized that the main difference between us was that he was making a budget and he was sticking to it while I didn't care. But when you don't have a budget or you don't stick to it, it's not the big expenses that will make you broke. It's those little expenses that slowly add up, like ordering a pizza instead of cooking at home, taking a taxi instead of taking the bus, that will be devastating for you. Knowing what I know today, my advice for you guys would be to look at each dollar you spend today as a small piece of financial freedom that you can have in your 30s. I never saved or made budget in my 20s because I never knew why I should do that. I did believe that money are there just to be spent. My aha moment happened when I realized that the most valuable asset that you can buy with money is freedom. The more money you make today, the more freedom you will have tomorrow, regardless of how much you make, because what matters is how much you keep. The second money mistake I've done in my 20s is not making the difference between wants and needs. I remember moving into this new apartment and I needed to buy a new carpet because the floor was pretty damaged. Therefore, I go to this big DIY shop, and when I enter, I see hanging from the ceiling this beautiful inflatable boat. It was on offer and the price was the exact budget that I had for the carpet. Near where I lived was this beautiful lake, and I always thought how great it would be to have an inflatable boat, especially that we were in the summer. So here I am looking at the perfect boat with the money in my pocket, and I say no, I am here to buy a carpet, I will buy a carpet. Therefore, I moved from the entrance to the carpet section, and of course I didn't find any carpet that I really liked. Without saying that, I had these two voices in my head, both shouting opposite things. I let you guess which voice I listened to. Few minutes later, I passed through the checkout, paid for my new acquisition, and instead of going home, I went straight to the lake, inflated my boat, and spent all the afternoon on the lake. In the meantime, my home didn't have a carpet for almost 6 months. This is a pretty funny example, and of course I wouldn't buy boats every day. However, I was very rarely successful in differentiating my needs and my wants. I would always choose to go somewhere for the weekend with the money meant to pay for my electricity bill, for example. In my mind, I was thinking that I will find a way, it will be okay, but in the end I always end up paying more in penalties because I didn't pay my bills in time. So my advice is to learn how to make the difference as soon as possible between what you need and what you want. Understanding that if you make the wrong choice, you will face real consequences that on the long term will cost you even more money. The third money mistake I've done so many times is impulsive buying. Man, if I would see something back then that I liked and I wouldn't buy it straight away, it would make me feel sick. I would literally think about it non-stop, and until I wouldn't buy it and have it in my possession, I wouldn't feel happy. In 2011, I didn't have a smartphone. I had just a normal old phone because I hated smartphones. Back then, the Samsung Galaxy S3 was just released and I remember falling in love with it. I started slowly to think how nice it would be to have a nice camera, to be able to answer emails straight away and all the good stuff, but I didn't make any decision yet. So one day here I am walking in a shopping center and I come across a phone shop. I see my favorite phone on display, so I say let's enter and see how much it would cost me. I remember being welcomed by this sales rep. He showed me different options on how I could buy the phone. All of them was way out of my budget, but this guy was such a good salesman that with each sentence he was saying, my urge to buy this phone started to grow more and more. I knew I couldn't afford it. I knew that if I would buy it, the monthly payment would be more than I can afford and they will cause me financial problems on the long term. But with all that, here I am 30 minutes later with my new smartphone in my pocket. I felt very unsettled, like when you know that you've done something wrong, but I choose not to listen to that voice. But only 3 weeks later, my car broke down and I didn't have any money to fix it. My only option was to desperately sell my phone at a lower price to be able to fix my car. And of course I kept paying monthly payments for that phone for the next 2 years, which ended up costing me at least 3 times the real value. To be honest with you guys, even today I still feel ashamed by this story. However, I do realize that I am what I am today because of this story and despite this story. I know I am not the only one with this kind of experiences, because when you're in your 20s you can easily fall prey to temptation. However, don't be so hard on yourself, and the most important is to learn from your mistakes. I realized that what I've done was wrong, I paid the price for it, and now I find ways to avoid to do the same mistakes. Whenever I go to a shopping center or even to a supermarket, I never buy something I was not expecting to buy in the first place, no matter how tempting the offer is. I would give it few days and think about it, and I would only buy it if it makes sense to do so. The fourth money mistake that I've done was related to dating. I met this girl at the pub, she was really cute, we had a great evening and we ended up swapping numbers. I definitely scored. This is back then when I was broke, not even able to make ends meet because I was an idiot. But of course I had to impress her, so a few days later we go out to this nice restaurant, then we went to a pub, then we went to a club, we had a great night that costed me half of my income. Unfortunately, throughout the years this didn't happen only once, but it happened many times. I also had 2 long distance relationships. Man, those are expensive. If I could give myself back then 2 advices, this is what they would be. 1. Avoid at all cost long distance relationships, because now I understand that what fuels those relationships is that feeling of defying the impossible. You are here and she's there and your love is greater than the Atlantic Ocean. So you start to craft all these impossible ways to be together that are only realistic if you put in a lot of money. And the main problem is that even if you manage to get together in the same city, country or even continent, most likely you will end up breaking up. Because guess what? When you only meet few times a year, each of you will try to give their best image. And you only start to know the person when you move in together in the same city or even in the same house, noticing things that you didn't notice before. More often than not, you will end up breaking up with this person, being in a country you don't want to be, having lost all this money when you could have had a better relationship back home. The second advice I would give is to not feel ashamed to accept to split the bill, or even to let my other half to pay from time to time. I was always trying to be a gentleman, thinking that as a man I should be the one paying, because I was making more money, so it was fair to pay for the expenses, for the food, for the travels, etc. It made me feel good. I felt responsible, like having everything under control. Now I realize how wrong I was by thinking like that, because when you don't let the other person to contribute, it creates that feeling that what is hers, but what is mine is ours. That creates discrepancy in the couple. Having both partners investing financially and emotionally brings equality and balance to the couple. My 5th financial mistake was to try to get rich quick. I started to invest in the stock market while I still had debt, thinking that if I would make a profit, I would be able to pay off that debt faster. And although I was lucky with my first investment, which was Tesla, that I managed to shamelessly sell for $350, making a 30% profit, and I used that money to buy stocks in GoPro, which at the time fell from $60 to $8, and in my brain I was convinced that the stock will bounce back. This never happened, and I ended up selling the stock with a 40% loss. Few months later, while I still had debt and was living paycheck to paycheck, I decided to start an Amazon FBA business. Of course, that business failed pretty quickly because I didn't have the foundation to start a business. The truth is that whoever tells you that you need no money or little money to start a business is lying. You need enough money for unexpected expenses that will come your way, and trust me, they will come. This is why I didn't start this YouTube channel until I became completely debt-free and have enough money saved to cover me for a few months. This puts me in a situation where I can afford working only 4 days a week, dedicating a full day to YouTube. The 6th mistake that I've done so many times in my 20s is not smashing the like button on this video. If I could go back in time, I would smash the like button, because then the algorithm will show this video to more people. Now it's time for the bonus part of the video, which is the 5 steps that I use to make sure I make good financial decisions. Without these 5 steps, I would definitely definitely not be debt-free, I would definitely not have enough savings, I would definitely not have money to invest. I can guarantee you that these 5 steps would change your financial situation for the better if you apply them. Just before we get into it, for full transparency, I have to say that these 5 steps I learned them from one of the videos of Graham Stephan. So let's start with step number 1, always buy it tomorrow. Whenever I come across something on Amazon or I want to buy something, I always wait one day before I buy it. I do this because whenever you buy something, there is a release of dopamine in your brain, which is responsible for happiness and well-being. But the funny part is that the dopamine spike doesn't happen when you buy the item, but just before that. In other words, it's the anticipation of buying that releases the dopamine, not the act of buying itself. And this makes sense to me. Whenever I buy a new phone or something like that, I'm always happier when I go to the shop compared to when I come back. So if you control that impulse of not buying straight away, chances are that you will wake up the next day with that urge of buying being diminished. Therefore, ending up most likely changing your mind and not buying the item. This happens a lot to me. And even if I wake up and I'm not completely sure if I should buy it or not, I think few more days, and until I'm not 100% convinced that I need the item, I don't buy it. More often than not, I will end up not buying the item, and even if I buy it, I am sure that I've made the right decision and I have no regrets. The second step is to ask yourself if you'd rather have the money. The idea behind it is that most of the time when you want something very badly, you actually forget how much it costs you. So let's say you want a car that costs you $20,000. If somebody put you to choose between giving you the car for free or giving you $20,000, which one would you actually choose? If you choose the money, then you shouldn't buy the car. Only if you choose the car, then you should buy the car. This technique will bring you back to reality, thinking that if you buy the car, you will actually lose that $20,000 that you have in your bank account, and it will make you realize if you really want that or not. The third step is to ask yourself how many hours do you have to work to pay for it. Let's take the same example of the car that costs $200 a month and you get paid $20 per hour. This means that you need to work 10 hours per month to pay for your car. Would you rather do that or spend the time doing something else? Remember that the greatest asset that you can buy with your money is freedom, and time is the only thing you cannot buy. The fourth trick is to move your savings to your saving account. Let's say you want to buy these new shoes that cost $100, but you use one of these 3 steps we spoke about and end up not buying it, so you have an extra $100. Make sure to transfer that money straight away to your saving account. This way, each time you make the right decision, you will see your savings growing, keeping you motivated. The fifth step is to think about the future value of your expenses. A pair of shoes that would cost you $100 today, if you invest that $100 instead in the stock market for 30 years, that $100 will be worth $1,000. So ask yourself, are those shoes worth $1,000 in future money? You can do the exact same thing when you go to Starbucks or when you go to any restaurant. Think about how much that money will be worth 30 years from today, and then decide if you want to go or no. Guys, I want to take a moment to thank you very much for watching this video till the end. Before you go, I have just one little request for you. Just write anything you want in the comment. Anything you want. This will help me with the algorithm and will push the video to way more people. Thank you in advance for that. I see you next Monday.